This was for my dad. Well, Sledgehammer for me is my harping back to the 60s. Black soul music of the 60s was one of the things that made me want to be a musician. I should say that the filming of it was actually quite an ordeal. It took, I think, over a month from start to finish, and it was a lot of work. Because we were doing it the old-fashioned way, for example, when clouds were painted across my face, so each time the skin had to be sort of rubbed down and the clouds would advance a little further. So that was quite painful. And then I was under glass a lot of the time when they were moving sort of the fish or the fruit around. And the fruit was all right, but the fish on day 2 stank to high heaven. It was incredibly hot. And my back was killing me, and it was so there was a certain amount of suffering that went into that video as well. I like the use of the biblical image in Blood of Eden because it presented a time when man and woman were supposed to be in one single body, and in many ways the relationship is a struggle to achieve some sort of perfect union.
It's very interesting working with Peter because he likes to work as a sort of team, and he likes to brainstorm ideas. So the sort of history of this video is that we've sat around and talked about his ideas about how he sees the song, why he wrote the song.
We also had the input of the theatre director Robert Lepage. We have the artist Zadok Ben David, who it's his word we're trying to recreate.
Zadok was commissioned. He was one artist who was commissioned to interpret the song in a sculptural form. So he produced a piece for Blood of Eden, and we've used that as a sort of basis for the video.
The third album was the first time I had a chance to work with Kate Bush, who was singing on Games Without Frontiers, and I'd heard Wuthering Heights that I really liked. I thought she had an extraordinary, wonderful voice and was doing great things as a writer. And you know, obviously went on to work with her again in the future on Don't Give Up. But there were, Paul Weller was also working down in the studio, and he came in the session. So it was an odd assembly of people. All the sounds on this thing are stored on these floppy disks, and some of these are supplied with the machine. This has a list of all the different sounds available on this floppy disk. Initially, when you first come into the studio, it's like walking into another world, and a mass of knobs and buttons which are totally foreign. And then as you spend more and more time in the studio, you learn what they all do and how to manipulate them to come up with things which are very different from the noises that first went in there. I hope to take sufficient time on the videos with this album to get something which is a little unusual. And the long form is something which I want to explore. I also think that the long form video has the potential for allowing what could be non-commercial music to work much more powerfully because of the teaming with strong visuals. I mean, great film directors have always known how to utilize music, you know, to really make a powerful experience for their images. And if we can learn a little more of that skill, I think it will produce something which has its own identity. A woman in white with a white umbrella getting smattered by red rain. And there was this sense of when emotion is blocked, which is an English tradition, it sometimes has a habit of seeping out of unsuspected edges. And so here, there was a story I was working on at one point called Mozo, which I ditched, but the idea was of a town unable to express its emotion, and so it becomes externalized in the form of blood red rain and this Red Sea. So that's its main preoccupation, and then put in the context of a relationship, you know, I'm sure with some of my experience thrown in there. I had the chance to visit Senegal and saw there this young singer, Youssou N'Dour is his name, with quite extraordinary voice. And he came to London, and I was very excited to be able to hijack him for a day down in my studio and get him to sing on a bit. And the track In Your Eyes features his voice. On this video, I've had comparatively very little input. You know, I've thrown in a few ideas, but it's basically Sean's baby.
Hi, I'm Chris McDonald. Come backstage. Mind your step here. This is where all the freaks are. Freak. Dad's upset. His daughter's selling sex. The dominatrix and her submissive. She was once a man. Come on.
I thought she was a man.
I thought she was a man.
Yeah, with Biko, which became a very important song for me, I'd not written an overtly political song before, and was wondering, you know, if it would be accepted, or I had various doubts. And Tom Robinson, who got to know at the time, who was championing various causes, but the gay cause was what he was most identified with at the time, was really telling me that I should just steam ahead and do it anyway, put it out, and that it didn't matter really what people, what people thought of my motives. If it got attention and money in the right direction, it actually didn't matter if my motives were all wrong in the first place, because it was still doing something worthwhile. And that, I think, put my mind at rest. And later on, you know, I think it led me towards some of the human rights stuff, which I'm still very much involved with today. I took a slow rhythm, which was a hypnotic pattern for me. It went dum 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 da, dum dum da, dum da. And this was very good to work around, and I could set other rhythms against it. I was reading a book called The Uses of Enchantment, and it was looking at a lot of fairy stories, more from a psychological point of view. And I found it very fascinating.
We're combining the concept of a music video with a ride film, one in which the chairs, the motion platform chairs, move the audience around in sync with the visual. That's the first time that's ever been done. We're actually having the chairs dance to the beat of the music at certain points, as opposed to just being keyed to the visual. So what's interesting to me,
it's a lot of fun and it's exciting, and it's a way of getting people inside it. I mean, I think there are all sorts of media being explored now where people are not just sitting outside observers and watching some small screen, but they're actually inside the experience and feeling it.
Mercy Street was a much more atmospheric piece, but I think important for me, and was inspired by the works of this poet Anne Sexton that I came across in a New York bookstore one time, and really fell in love with this wonderfully rich poetry. The video's a young French director who was actually a sort of video or CGI graphics boffin, and he's started directing now, but he's called Francois Vogel, and he looks a bit like Francois Truffaut, in fact, but he's a quiet, I think, introspective, reflective character. It's always good to work with people that are still exploring what their métier is, rather than, know it well and turn out another. I don't believe that I can play music belonging to another culture. Just there will be certain key elements which I will steal to start off as a structure for something that I'm working on. And I think if you look at the history of music, you see this process going on continuously. And for me, it's something which sets up a whole series of challenges, and I think has revitalized what I do in my own work. On-toe windscreen, take one. 1, 2, 3, 4. TV smash, take one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Take two. Bit more force. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just the wind on the pipe is quite nice. Are we 7 or something? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we did it. Oh, it looks good.
I met Stephen in 1986. Stephen had just finished producing Sledgehammer. His ideas were original, they were new, they were fresh. I love the way he shot things, and I love the way he edited them. I'm technically very up to date on a lot of equipment, and a lot of what Stephen does is very effectsy, and he pushes the medium in terms of what he wants his images to do. There isn't a scene in there that doesn't have layers. You have the background, and then you have the live action layer, and then you have the animated layer, and then you have the mats that went into all that. We used a lot of computer animation and computer generated stuff.
It's the idea of sitting in an airplane and looking down, about to make a jump, and only seeing cloud below you and not sure where you're going to land. So in some ways it's like looking at the end of your life and imagining what's coming up. This is quite a rough vocal, and we did it as a guide, and there was a lot of noise from the sort of fans and everything else in the room. And I've tried one time to re-sing it, and there are some bad notes in this performance, but I think it's got a good mood. I want to continue exploring this hybrid between electronic or high-tech and non-European influence. And I think a lot more rock musicians are now working in this area, and there will be a style of music to emerge in the 80s, which I think will be very important and influential.
The kind of work that attracted Peter to me was the television programs I'd made in the past, which explored the natural world, but from a very different sort of viewpoint. I'd experimented with multi-layering technique, where you had plants growing in time-lapse while you had a background which was moving in a different time, but a sort of manipulated time, played around with it, combining at times high speed and time-lapse together. The actual shooting, which was simultaneous with the conception of it really, because it had to be because of the time scale, was 1 month. The snare sequence is great because it actually developed a lot further than I'd originally intended it to, mainly because Peter's such a great guy to work with and he doesn't know when to say no. And so initially we were just going to have snails crawling over his ear, and then he sort of didn't seem to mind that, so it started crawling over his eye, and then it was crawling over his mouth.